Back to Pantheon Plus after returning to the world of superheroes for a number of months to discuss various Marvel properties and Spider-Man. We are going to be doing something a little bit different for this for the end of this month here, as we are just coming off of Thanksgiving, the last Tuesday here in November, and we will be doing the next 3 Tuesdays, the first 3 of December, before we go to the last episode that Kevin and I recorded discussing Togetherness Season 2. But here tonight, Brian and I are here to do something different. We are going to be discussing various Christmas episodes of your favorite television shows. And, we're not going to determine Pantheon eligibility necessarily, but we're going to have some kind of awards that we're going to be discussing some of the Christmas tropes that these various shows use. And we've divided these up into various categories. Now, tonight, we are going to be reviewing classic sitcoms. And basically, I would say classic sitcoms for the purposes of this is any episode that aired before the year 2000. We did not even come close. We are going to be reviewing 3 episodes. We are going to be reviewing an episode from season 1 of Taxi. We are going to be reviewing an episode of season 6 of Cheers, as well as season 2 of Full House. So that is what we're going to be doing. My co-host for this week and every week is Brian DeBrain. You can find him on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. You can find me on Twitter, Jerome Cuson, at Jerome C 1985. At least for now, you can find us on Twitter. You can also find us at Hero Pantheon. Brian, we decided to do something a little bit different this month as we are going to luxuriate in some very interesting Christmas episodes of various sitcoms and other shows, and we'll reveal what we're doing next week at the end of this episode. But we wanted to start off by talking about some classic sitcoms back in the day when they were done. They were all multicam. They all had theme songs. The episodes are 25 minutes. Maybe the plots that were a little shaggier than your typical plots that you would find on The Office or Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where the episodes are barely 20 minutes. But there's a little bit of looseness to some of the classic ones that we are going to be discussing this week. So, Brian, are you excited to celebrate the holidays by examining these shows?
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. This was kind of like my backdoor idea to what I originally I pitched a Patrick Swayze month for Christmas, for the Christmas holidays, and Jerome's just like, that's so weird. We can't do it. We'll do it eventually, but we just can't do it. It's just too weird. So I was like, okay, let's do Christmas special since we've been watching a lot of movies lately, and we've been watching the Spider-Man show. It's like, okay, let's go watch some classic shows since HBO Max has, got all the Full House catalog, and then the Peacock's got a bunch of old sitcoms there, and then you got Paramount with the classic stuff with Cheers and Taxi. So it just kind of fits since me and Jerome are big Cheers fans anyway. Like, we always seem to talk about it on the podcast or off air somehow, and we always end up debating whether or not Diane was the better replacement or not, or was Woody better than Coach. I tend to lean towards more Woody, but that's just me. But yeah, we're big Cheers marks as well. And if you look at the history, the Charleses, I call them, Glenn and Les Charles, or Larry Charles, they actually created a good portion of the James L. Brooks produced Taxi. So it just all kind of comes together. And if you look when Taxi actually ends, it actually is like the year before Cheers. And what Jerome just told me off air before we started, that Ted Danson got the role for Cheers based on his cameo or his guest starring role on Taxi. So everything is just connecting right now, and we didn't even put these connections together because the title of this episode for Taxi is A Full House for Christmas, and little did Jerome realize that, oh shit, Full House is in the title. We're reviewing Full House in the same episode. Everything is just coming together in a big Christmas miracle in a nice, pretty bow.
If you didn't make the bow reference, then this whole thing was just a waste of your time. So what we are going to do is we are going to kind of go in order by air date, and that, of course, means that we are going to start with Taxi, Season 1, Episode 13, A Full House for Christmas. Now, it's really, I will just go over the brief concept of what each sitcom is. Obviously, we're talking about a group of people here that are working at a taxi cab service, and there's a lot of cast members, and two of the more prominent ones were not even in this episode. Christopher Lloyd was an important part of the show in later seasons. He is not in season 1. Andy Kaufman, who is listed as being in the credits, but I know that if you've watched Man on the Moon or seen any documentaries, you know he was in kind of a weird situation in terms of potentially missing a few episodes. Was Tony Clifton supposed to be in this episode? That's also a possibility. But the bottom line is that you don't get those two, but you get basically everyone else. You get Judd Hirsch, Danny DeVito, Jeff Conway, Mary Lou Henner. And the idea is pretty simple. It's just a bunch of people that are working in a taxi cab. The thing that always strikes me about watching these older sitcoms, and I think people are always talking about this, is like how much older they look compared to how people look now. And I think that one of the things that struck me just in watching Taxi, especially, I got this a little bit with watching Cheers, but just how normal looking everybody is. Like, not everybody has a six pack, not everybody is super buff. And I just want to say, I really appreciate the fact that there was a time when you did not have to be like the most gorgeous looking person to be a prominent part of a TV show. Like, Judd Hirsch looks like a normal dude. Danny DeVito definitely looks like just a normal dude. Very short one, in fact. But yeah, that's definitely something that struck me. I will say, though, Mary Lou Henner, we recently talked about her, Kevin and I did, when we talked about Party Down. Just an all-timer, Brian. I need not say more. Just Mary Lou Henner is an all-timer.
Yeah, I believe it, and I've heard great things about that show too as well, Party Down, and it's on my to-watch list amongst the many shows to watch that I've never seen before. Apparently, Andor, I got to get on that train, or someone's gonna get mad at me. But anyway, so Taxi, I'm glad you mentioned like the look of the show, because I noticed this too. It was more so the background and like the set design. It's New York, right? So it's New York in the 70s, so it looks really dark and grimy, and like the colors are very muted, and like it's not a very vibrant show. Like, it's definitely not for the visuals at all, because like the taxis are just so old looking. I know it's the 70s, but goddamn, like they made everything look so grungy and old in that little garage that they're all sitting there and just playing poker. I just thought, like, man, like I think if this was made today, they would have definitely brightened that setup a lot and made it look more appealing, because they really went for the realism. Like you mentioned, the realistic characters and the realistic vibes and just the average Joes amongst this place. And you look at the set design and it kind of reflects that. And I think probably the most iconic part of the set is the cage, right? And even the cage, when they film it, it's not like closed off. Everyone can hear what's going on in the cage, but there's a conversation. So I just love the look of it because it's so dark and grimy, and it's so like what we're not used to seeing in modern sitcoms. Like, for example, you take How I Met Your Mother, right? Everyone's in bright clothing. It's still, I think, in New York or whatever, but it definitely doesn't look as grimy as this. And then you look at Friends in the 90s and the same thing. It's like, okay, we got to get away from that grimy look of New York. So I really appreciate the down and dirty look, because I watched this and I think, God, this is spot on with like Taxi Driver and that look of the cabbies in the 70s going into the early 80s. So I really appreciate that. And then the dialogue just really is just on point. And I feel like a lot of this dialogue, I don't know if like there was other sitcoms, probably like All in the Family had that as well, with Archie Bunker. Just some of those like insults that Danny DeVito can just deliver like off the top of his head. That's what I love about old school sitcoms, especially like Married with Children, the Cheers gang when they're insulting each other, shit like that, man. That's what I really love. And I guess that's what I love about like modern wrestling as well, when they're just insulting each other and like that Attitude Era kind of insulting. You kind of get that vibe from this show, especially more so than like Full House. But I think Taxi is such a more adult themed show. And just the way it looks, man. I think I'm gonna go back and binge it because it's only 5 seasons. And I've only seen a handful of episodes, and the most memorable episode, of course, for me is when Latka got trapped in the snowstorm with that other female cabbie, and they just was like, either we have sex or we die. And I was like, wow, what a predicament, man. And that one predicament really stuck out for me and Eddie Kaufman or Latka. God bless Andy Kaufman's soul, but like Latka just had to pay the price for that one. So that's the most memorable episode for me out of the handful I've seen. But this definitely shows you this Christmas episode, probably like the strengths of Danny DeVito and what he was able to do. And I say he's the lead in this show, even though Judd Hirsch gets the title lead.
I mean,
But
I think that Judd Hirsch is more so the lead of the show, but I think in this episode, it's much more about Louis. Like, I feel like we just happened to watch an episode that wasn't totally focused on the Alex character. Alex, of course, is the one that is played by Judd Hirsch. I think it's just happenstance. But just to talk about, like, the general premise of the episode, everybody is seemingly going to be alone for Christmas. Louis has a younger brother. He also calls him his little brother, which of course is comedic because Danny DeVito is a very tiny man. Louis' brother is in town. He is a big time poker player. His brother has abandoned the family the last 6 Christmases. And yeah, just a very funny moment when he introduces him as his little brother, Nicky. So of course, Nicky decides that instead of spending time with their mom, he is not going to do that. He is instead going to clean out all of the taxi drivers and take their money, which he does. And Louis is just getting increasingly angry about what's going on because Louis is the one that is responsible for taking care of their mom. And he wants a break. Like, you know, as much of I think the thing that we get in this episode is that, look, Louis is kind of an asshole boss, but I think there are a couple of moments, like the fact that he is the one that is taking care of their mom. And despite all the jokes that he makes, and all the problems, like it just feels like he just wants a break. Like that's all he wants. And I also love when the kids come in, sing, get the money, they give their cut to Louis. Like that's also a really, really funny moment. And yeah, this episode is just a tremendous showcase for Danny DeVito as Louis. So we'll get into kind of what the payoff is and kind of how this episode develops, but tell me what your feelings were just on kind of the first part as the characters were kind of making themselves known.
see, I don't know if I'm just kind of like a victim of modern writing. I thought they were leading towards something when he says that I can't take Ma to Vegas, and he makes up some excuse. Like I thought the idea was that he's going to be like they're going to reveal that he was banned from the casinos and he can't go back to Vegas, and that's why he's on the run or whatever. But I guess that's just kind of like the modern writing in me, where you kind of take those little nuggets of information and you kind of like give a backstory to it. So it wasn't as complex as I thought it was going to be with the background, because he ended up just taking his mom at the end. But I do love the concept of a poker playing brother, and that the fact that you realize that Dan DeVito's character is like this really, like, he does care about his mom, and he's not this asshole that everyone just assumes he is because he is the boss. So that mixed with the fact that, like, I don't know, just something about poker on like the idea of poker on a Christmas night. I don't know what it is, but it just seems so like sad. But I guess that's the point, right? Because like, why are you giving away all your money when you could be giving it to others and blah blah blah? And it's that kind of that selfish idea of what poker kind of represents anyway, playing poker on Christmas night or Christmas Eve or whatever. So that part of the Christmas story, like I enjoyed that part because that kind of ties in with the Christmas nature of it all. This is where like the Tony Clifton possibly comes in, because I don't know, I just read the note on Wikipedia that he was supposed to play the brother. But because of, we know now that Andy Kaufman is Tony Clifton, or was part of the time. But I guess when he came on set as Tony Clifton, he just pissed everyone off. And we saw that in Man on the Moon, because when you watch Man on the Moon, you're like, oh shit, I never knew Tony Clifton was on Taxi. I don't remember that, because he never was. So this has to be the episode that they were going to schedule him for, because that's the note. So this kind of ties in with the Man on the Moon movie as well, even though we don't actually see Andy Kaufman in this episode, but it does give you a background as to why A, he's not there, and B, like what was going to happen with Tony Clifton if he was on the show. So I thought that was a nice little note, and tying all those Easter eggs together, like it just kind of makes this episode seem a little more historic than we thought it was going to be, because of what we know based on Andy Kaufman and the movie and all that, and every documentary we've seen on him. So I thought that was a good little insight to that. And then you mentioned Christopher Lloyd not being there, which is interesting because in the movie it kind of portrays Christopher Lloyd as if he was in this episode. So just little nuggets of information there. But I do like the idea of Elaine suggesting a Christmas party, and that she's got like, was it 3 kids, and that she's divorced, and that the kids are with the dad this year. So there's a lot of realism there that I really appreciate. These characters are very grounded. And they're all kind of lonely, but they're all coming together on Christmas. So that's that idea of Christmas coming together. So I really dig that. I really love the performances as well. Even though Judd Hirsch is only, he's this, he's not the main guy, but him at the table at the end, that was some great poker. Because sometimes like you watch a movie like Rounders, and it's good, but it's not as like entertaining as it could be. And then you watch, something like this, and it's like, God, this makes poker much more entertaining.
I just think the way this all pays off, I think Judd Hirsch, so much of what he's doing is reacting to the insanity of the situation. He's reacting to Louis. He's reacting to Nikki. So I think that's what Judd Hirsch, and I think there is a skill to that. I don't think we necessarily give actors a lot of credit for it, but I think this is an instance where the performance isn't just the active listening and the reacting to what's going on. And Alex is the facilitator. He is apparently of all the people that are in the garage. I wish they had done a better job establishing this earlier, but basically putting forth this idea that he's the best player. I wish they had shown that a little bit more. But Louis decides that he's going to give his brother an ultimatum. The brother's like, "Screw it, I'm done. I don't want to see mom anymore." So he's going to play, and Louis decides that he is going to stake Alex, and they kind of go back and forth. And there's a lot of money on the table. Like $3,000 is a lot of money still today. In 1978, when this aired, it's worth even more, of course. And so things are escalating at the end. Just a lot of huge betting going on. This is, I think, where the writing just really comes into play, because it escalates where they're putting money on the table, they're putting jewelry on the table, and finally it comes down to Nikki going all in and Alex calling, and Nikki puts his airline ticket on the table. Alex is increasingly getting annoyed by all of this because it's not his money, so he cares in probably the most minimal sense. But Louis bets his mother and says if Nikki wins this one hand, that Nikki is off the hook. But if Alex wins, then Nikki has to take the mother to Las Vegas. One of the another underrated highlight is that the kids who are singing, so they come in, they sing Hallelujah, they leave and collect their money. The kids are in the background just watching this, which I thought was pretty amusing. And Nikki makes a pretty fatal poker mistake, Brian. He has two pair. Alex has trips, which I can't tell you how many times I've seen that and been victimized that myself. And afterwards, the kids sing Hallelujah. It's a pretty great moment. Some vindication for Alex and Louis, which you don't very often get on Taxi. And I really enjoyed this episode. And I want to point out that Cheers also has a really, really good poker episode. It might even be better than this one, just because there's a couple more twists and turns that I won't spoil. But the Cheers episode of with poker is also really excellent. But yeah, this was probably my favorite of the 3 episodes that we watched this week.
I might lean towards more Full House, and I'll get to that later on because it reminded me of something that I think you'll kind of pick up on. But I just wanted to point out too, like I thought Jeff Conway did this great job, even though he had like maybe 4 lines in the whole episode. He's Bobby Wheeler. The fact that he listed off everything that was on the line and put it in perspective, and then the guy on the phone's like, "Hey, did you hear that?" Because he's talking. The guy, I forgot the other guy, but he's supposed to be going home to his wife, and the wife is on the phone listening to him doing a play-by-play of the poker game, and she's more into that than actually like hanging out with her mom and dad. I thought that was a hilarious side bit, because I was just thinking like, man, she's really into this. For 3 hours, she's been on the phone with this guy, like doing a play-by-play. So I thought that was a really fun little side gag. And then, with Jeff Conway listing all the stakes and then leading up to the final reveal, I think this is kind of a trope in itself. But I think whenever they do poker stuff or poker, scenes or movies or whatever, there's always this trope that's got to be like a full house, right? Or a straight flush. But they kind of went with like the lesser. So that was kind of interesting. And then, 666. I don't know if that's like explicitly like saying, hey, the devil won this hand or whatever, but I thought that was a little like, oh, 666. I don't know if anyone's going to pick up on that except me, but maybe that was just, by chance or whatever, because it could have been 777s. You know what I mean? Like they specifically put 666. I don't know, but overall, I think this episode wraps up nicely. And the kids in the background, I thought was a great little touch, because it just made it seem like, well, this is such a hot thing going on that like I'd be interested in watching this fucking poker showdown if I was going door to door singing, and then all of a sudden I saw this and everyone's going crazy. Like, yeah, that's a kind of an event. Like all of a sudden, so um, very entertaining to watch. And if I were to recommend another poker-esque episode, I'd go with the Married with Children one, where Al gives up a full house or whatever just to get a straight flush or whatever, because he feels like this bad luck is gonna, or this good luck is gonna end and turn into bad luck, which it does. But that's kind of the trope within itself when you have poker episodes. But in terms of Christmas tropes, this seemed kind of like non-tropey, except for the fact that it's just everyone getting together on Christmas, right?
Yeah, I think that I don't even necessarily know that I would consider that a trope, because I think you almost, like, you're a TV show that's, if you're a non-family TV show, like you have to create a way for your characters to come together. So I will say, I think this the other two episodes, I definitely think there are some tropes, and we'll get into those. But we're going to give out some awards for each of them, just some quick back and forth. So the Taxi theme song, which you heard at the beginning of this episode, Brian, obviously there's 4 rankings: non-existent, forgettable, is it a bop, or, because we're a show called Pantheon Plus, is this a Pantheon level theme song? I say it's a bop. I think it's very good. I think it's memorable. I don't think it's top tier, though.
Yeah, it's a bop level for sure. I mean, if you love smooth jazz every once in a while, which I do, every time sometimes you want to get stoned and listen to smooth jazz, and you listen to stuff that sounds like the Taxi theme or the Taxi theme itself. But again, I think the problem is that there's no lyrics, so lyrics does add to that catchiness to it whenever you have like a song like from the 90s or sitcoms, lyrics play a key to that. There's no lyrics in the Taxi theme song, and I think that I think the 80s is when they started doing those kind of like, writing a song specifically for the intro for this show, and then, it's a catchy tune, and then everyone picks up on it. But in this case, I don't think we were quite there yet. I think we're going to get there once we hit, the Full House levels. But because it's the same thing for Cheers. Cheers does, Cheers does have the lyrics, but it's more recognizable, I think, from the opening piano. So this one is definitely bop level for me.
All right, I'm going to say the best line. I think it's just the back and forth betting at the end. I don't think there's if you want to highlight an individual line, you can. Maybe it's Louis calling Nicky his little brother. That might actually be the best pure line of dialogue, but just the escalation in the writing at the end, and then Jeff Conway's character explaining it at the end. That's really good stuff. That's a really good sitcom payoff.
For me, it's Louis answers the phone, and he goes, "Quiet, crazy lady," and then he tells his brother, "It's Ma," and I couldn't stop laughing. That was the one for me that I just lost it, because that's the kind of those sitcom lines like that stick out the most for me. It's where it's like almost insulting, but it's kind of like a thing out of love, and then it's like you're describing someone crazy, and it turns out it's a family member. So that's kind of like a trope within sitcoms itself. But I thought the way it was delivered, it's expectation and delivery basically when it comes to comedy. When it comes to comedy, you set up certain expectations and deliver like just some totally random answer that kind of adds to it. So that's kind of what this is like the crazy lady's mom.
All right, let's the best performance. I think this one's pretty cut and dry. It's Danny DeVito. I mean, I don't think you could really make an argument for anyone else.
Stole the show, not the whole show, but this particular episode. I don't know if the rules were the same for Emmys back in the day, but this might have been the episode they submitted him for, if I were to guess, right? Because I think he got nominated almost every year too. Him, Judd Hirsch, like almost everybody got like the top billing that got nominated every year. So if I were the guy, submitting the episodes for the Emmys, this would have been.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So the Christmas scale, it is a combination of the quality and the level of Christmas involved. So I'm giving this a 7.5 because I think it's a really good episode, and Christmas is a part of the episode, but I don't think it's as direct as the other two episodes that we're talking about. So that's why I'm giving it a 7.5 out of 10.
I'm going to go with 7 because basically the only, thing that kind of made it Christmassy was just, everyone coming together and the caroling. Because, either, if you substitute the holiday, this could have been Thanksgiving and the plot could have been
right. Yeah,
So,
it could have been exactly the same.
but
Yeah.
that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, we weren't at the level yet of what a Christmas episode should be. I don't think, because it feels like, I don't know, maybe like the Full House one was the one that kind of like, okay, we got to change it up a bit because this was like
I mean,
so.
I would say the Cheers one is much more directly Christmas. I mean,
Oh,
I would
sure.
say Cheers had a couple Christmas ones. We could have actually done one that's earlier, but I don't think that one was as directly as Christmassy as the second one. And honestly, I really just wanted to talk about Taxi. Like that's the main reason that we're doing this. And Brian, I always want to do like a main takeaway or like the moral of the story. For me, Brian, the main takeaway is don't bet people in poker games. That's rude.
My main takeaway is visit your mom as much as possible.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name.
All right, so you just heard it. Our next episode is Christmas Cheers, airing on December the 17th, 1987. And Brian, this is coming at a very interesting time because season 6 of Cheers was very different for the simple fact that back in the day, you either were a TV star or you were a movie star, and you basically you had to make a decision. So Shelley Long was a part of a very popular TV show, Cheers. The first season, it was one of the worst ranked shows of the TV season. It stayed on the air, and it eventually became one of the most popular sitcoms of the 1980 season of the 1980s. It would eventually run 11 seasons, over 200 episodes, and Ted Danson and so many others collected giant gobs of money from this sitcom. And coming into season 6, they replaced Diane Chambers, as played by Shelley Long, with Rebecca Howe, as played by Kirstie Alley. It's the amazing part about this show is that in order to determine the craziest cast member, either Kelsey Grammer or Kirstie Alley, it's a legitimate competition when you think about their political beliefs and some of the things that they believe in. But that is not what we're here to discuss. We are going to discuss the individual episode itself. And I have to say that I always preferred the first half. I think the second half certainly has some really good episodes, but for me, the best dynamic was always Sam and Diane, and Norm and Cliff and Frasier, and kind of them being more background players. I think that's always the version of the show I liked better. Woody, I think I liked Coach in the first couple seasons, but I definitely think that Woody added something. He made the show younger, and I think they needed that. I think they needed a character like Woody to come in after a couple seasons, even though, what happened to Nicholas Colasanto was kind of sad. But I was always a big fan of the transition of Woody. Rebecca, it just felt like they always had trouble like trying to crack that character. It felt like it took a really long time to like figure out like who she was as a person. And part of that difficulty is the fact that she is coming into this freaking television show that is so popular and has like this huge cast that has seemingly been together for such a long time and has this chemistry together, and like that's a really tough thing. And this show could have very easily died on the vine. So many of these sitcoms, when they have these big cast changes, they go 1 or 2 seasons and then they get canceled because the ratings go down. But this show, like, it was number one in the ratings for like multiple seasons afterward. And arguably, there are episodes, even in season 10 and 11, that are as good as the show ever was. And the finale of this show is excellent. This episode specifically, I think it's a good episode, Brian. I don't think it's like top tier level for me.
Yeah, it's not one of the best Cheers episodes. Like, me personally, I've seen maybe like 60 to 70% of every Cheers episode, and the ones I've seen, I always got to go with Woody's wedding, man, and that two-parter, and it was just so perfectly well timed in terms of the physical comedy and the timing that it felt so old school, but it was so modern, and the audience laughter was just so off the charts that It's one of those laughters on audience laughters that I'll always remember because it kind of transcended the normal like level of volume that the laughter was supposed to be at. But because that episode is so genuinely hilarious that it made it even further when the audience levels were just kind of bursting through the sound system, basically. Because that's exactly what I remember for those two episodes. Like everyone was laughing so hard at that wedding that it took it to another level because the laughing was so much more than usual. But for me, I'm personally more of a Rebecca guy because I kind of find Kirstie Alley more comedic, and I don't know. That's probably because before I even started watching Cheers, I watched the Look Who's Talking movies, and I love those movies a lot as a kid. And of course, she's the mom, and she's funny in that, and I really dig those characters from that, and then the John Travolta character and the Bruce Willis baby character. Amy Heckerling knocked it out of the park, I think, with that first movie. So for me, like it's probably just a bias. That's why I lean towards more Rebecca. And I understand that because a lot of people love that Sam and Diane dynamic. But I recall watching these episodes kind of like in a marathon on Nick at Night back in, I don't know, early 2000s when they brought them on. And just kind of getting like, okay, the Diane Sam thing is fine. And then eventually kind of just grew on me to the point where it's like, okay, is this the point where they're going to walk into the back office and start talking and kind of bullshit around for 2 minutes and then eventually get to the main point? That's kind of what it felt for me. And they did do that with Rebecca, but I felt Rebecca was more resistant to his bullshit. So that made it like, okay, she's not just going to be like Diane. You know what I mean? She's going to be more of a boss and more in charge. And that's what she is. Like the first, especially this season, the season that she comes and debuts in, she's more of the boss. And she's not as wacky, you know what I mean, until later on when she meets that rich asshole boyfriend of hers in the later seasons. And I think that's probably why I lean towards more Rebecca, just because I saw more of her as a kid. And for me, Woody, I think you're right. It did bring the show that youth that it needed. But I just felt like his style of humor, I don't know, it's so much more like, it's more like country, like Midwest kind of feel, that character, because he's from that kind of area of the country, compared to Coach, where his style of humor is more like that Boston East Coast humor. You kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I think that one of the most important things about the transition from Coach to Woody was that you would get a lot of like farm humor, country bumpkin stuff. So that's definitely. I mean, like the idea.
It ties into this episode for sure because that's all about Woody. Like it's
basically it's like his first
farm Christmas.
Yeah, it's his first time away from being away from his family. So let's talk about. I want to talk about the way this episode begins because I think this is a perfect Cheers opening. They always had really good bumpers for their episodes, and so there was a time, and I remember this. I when I came into like consciousness about this, I remember that It's a Wonderful Life was just on in perpetuity. It's a Wonderful Life is like a ubiquitous part of Christmas, but that used to not be the case. It is the case because it lost its copyright. So any television station could air it as often as they wanted. So what that means is that Cheers had It's a Wonderful Life on, and it was on all the time. And I know Home Alone, it was kind of a running gag in Home Alone, the first two. So It's a Wonderful Life, now it only airs like twice a year on NBC, but there was a time it was just on all the time. So, the gang is kind of sick of it, and they're seemingly hating it until the ending, and then everyone ends up crying anyway, which I feel like that is It's a Wonderful Life in a nutshell. Like, that is the perfect distillation. It is this very cheesy, kind of hammed up drama / comedy, but in the end, like, you're still in tears because that ending is pretty great.
God, you're gonna hate me for saying this, but I've never watched It's a Wonderful Life.
How have you never watched It's a Wonderful Life? Like, how?
Because my generation grew up with the 24-hour Christmas Story marathon.
But those
that
things
was my
were
one. For me, It's a Wonderful Life. For me, is a Christmas Story, essentially.
I do not understand how you've never seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Look, if I had a choice to watch a Jimmy Stewart movie, it's either going to be Rope or Rear Window, and
which are very different.
I mean, they're both Hitchcock movies, but those are like my two favorites. And if I had to pick a third one, it's probably gonna be another Hitchcock movie. Now that I think about it, but
I will tell you, I think
Valance. I don't know.
I think It's a Wonderful Life is Jimmy Stewart's best performance, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Well, okay. It's just that you hear about it every year, and it's like, I think I'd rather watch this.
I mean, the biggest thing is that it's not a Christmas movie until the last half hour, but like it's I think the essence of the movie is something that I think gets lost because the overall message is like, yes, there is that the very tropey ending which they kind of hint at, but like the overall message of the movie is I think a little bit more complicated than people give it credit for.
Yeah, because apparently the guy wanted to kill himself, right? That's the whole.
Right. I mean, but the
Yeah.
whole idea is that, as a person, you have an impact on people's lives that you can't even see. So if you don't exist, then the other people in your life are going to be impacted by that in a dramatic way. And that's the whole message of the movie, is that this person, even though he has seemingly lived this innocuous, average American life, he has still been able to impact members of his family, friends. Like it's a deeper movie that I think people give it credit for. I think it kind of gets reduced to being like this Christmas movie, but I think it's a lot more than that.
For sure. I respect that. I think the problem is, too, is like growing up in the later generations, a lot of sitcoms just made fun of it. With like
Right? Yeah. I mean, I know
Angel
Family
and
Guy
his
is.
Wig. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Family Guy. Had
Married
some
with
jokes
Children, I think,
about
actually
it.
did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of been like a trope within itself, but I
All
do
right.
like the full circle of it all. That was really cool.
Okay, so Cliff wants to win a free trip to Disney World and is holding a food drive. He doesn't even care about what the food drive is for, which is, I mean, that's perfect 1980s America right there. I mean, probably still holds up to this day, but so Cliff eventually loses by one can, but Woody forgets to put two cans in the thing, and then Cliff takes it. And at the end of the episode, Cliff is literally chasing down the plane to the point where they take a news break at the end of It's a Wonderful Life. We'll get to like the main plot in just a second, but what a fantastic way to begin and end the episode with It's a Wonderful Life, and paying off the Cliff storyline. I really like that.
Oh, Cliffy, man. It's kind of sucks that he didn't have a lot of like dialogue in this one. He kind of was just like almost disappeared. Like that was the whole thing. Like let's kind of get him out of the way because we got to focus on some other characters. But I did like his appearance, and I did like that tie-in at the end. I wish they had like a footage of him throwing the can at the plane, which I thought would have been awesome. But
I actually think it's
they couldn't
funnier
get.
that we don't see the footage. I think there's nothing they could do that is as funny as it is in your imagination.
I get that, but the visualization of him throwing that can at the plane is just so ridiculous that you know what I mean. It's just like that's such a Cliff thing to do. If you know the character Cliff, that's kind of his thing. Like it's probably like he probably had like this idea that what else can I do? You know what I mean? It's like he's not the type of person that asserts himself. You know what I mean? So this is him asserting himself, and it's just the most ridiculous thing. That's the way I see it.
All right, so Rebecca is back from. She is at the corporate Christmas party, which this is one of those seasons where Sam is not in charge of the bar. So Rebecca, being the boss, she has said that everybody's working on Christmas, but I mean, at least it's for time and a half. So that's the thing. It's like I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but I would imagine like Christmas Eve could be a pretty big deal, and working time and a half. And if you get the right crowd and you have people like in the bar and whatnot, like you could probably make a pretty good amount of money on Christmas Eve, even though it's not the most ideal thing. Sam is just kind of being a whiny brat about it. And I mean, look, Sam really doesn't have much of a family, so he doesn't really have a right to complain.
Man, I have worked Christmas Eve in retail, like at a grocery store and at Blockbuster.
Oh my
And
God.
And you would think no one would show up. Believe me, you would think no one would show up.
No, I disagree.
It's the
I would
opposite.
actually say in retail, especially, everybody would show up.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was Blockbuster, and it was like a family thing, and this was like 2008, I think, or 2007, and I was just like, my shift ended at like 3:30, or no, maybe 4, because I had my family thing, and I kept thinking like, no one's gonna show up, and I couldn't believe the amount of people. It felt like a Saturday at a Blockbuster, so I was just like, I guess so, man. And then it really hit home when you said that, and I was like, Sam, you have no idea You have no idea how much business you've been losing out on the last 10, 15 years for being closed on Christmas Eve. And despite the workers not liking it, I get it. I was paid my time and a half. It was fine. I just don't want to work in a grocery store on Christmas Eve ever again because that was a nightmare.
That seems like an absolute nightmare.
Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve in a grocery store, you do not want to be working that. But I did it when I was younger, so I can totally sympathize. But especially with Carla, when she thought no one was going to come in, and then all of a sudden, like 15 people walk in, I've had that feeling. And it's not a good feeling, but you kind of press on and you push through it and you think about the time and a half at the end of the day. And I didn't even know they had time and a half back in '87, to be honest. So I guess progress, right?
Yes, I would say so. So we get Norm reading a review of so Woody is in a play and Norm is reading the review and it's written by a child. Some very good George Wendt material. Again, George Wendt, you don't get a lot of Norm in this episode either, and I think that might be one of the reasons why it may not be our favorite, because there really isn't a lot of like the side gags and kind of the side conversations. But we do get Norm. He is apparently working as a Santa for the holidays. Brian, you DM'd me about Norm drinking beer before going out and being Santa. I have to say, it's probably more common than you think.
Oh, I know. I've seen Bad Santa, and I saw the trailer for the new Bad Santa remake that they're not calling Bad Santa, but they put David Harbour in it, and he's doing the Die Hard thing. But yeah, I think it's become like a trope now where you see a Santa just get drunk before going to work. It feels like that because of Bad Santa, but I guess this was, way before that. So I couldn't stop laughing, and I kept thinking like, oh my God, this is such the Billy Bob Thornton thing. And like, oh my God, he's going to talk to kids drunk. And then when you put it that way, Jerome, I'm like, yeah, I can even see it now in 2022. This Christmas, that the guy at the mall dressed as Santa is probably drunk off his ass because he's got to deal with kids all day. And
it's hard to blame him.
They really put it in perspective because when he brings in the other Santas, they were just like done with it. They were completely. It looked like they went through hell, and then they're just sitting there drinking like, I ain't moving. You know what I mean? Like, I respect that. So I love that little humor. And he talks about the kids later on, but I just wish, you know what I mean? Like, I wish we got to see that, but because they only have so much time. But I thought some of the concepts they came up with for this episode, they could have stretched out and maybe like done like a year later, like give like Norm like a whole maybe half episode to himself in the mall. But we never really got that. But I do like that idea of him in the mall. Like, that's something that I wish we saw, because I love Norm, man, and we all love Norm. But he's always relegated to his chair, and that's the gimmick, and his milk-bone underwear, so to speak. But yeah, I love Norm, and it was great to see him in this role. And I love the tease of the real Santa, even though, I mean, it's such a trope already.
The tease to the real Santa is great because they play off of it so well, and then they have him come back and ask for a jump, and that was Chef's Kiss. That was a great moment.
That's a total Cheers type humor moment. You know what I mean? They have this. They set you up for like, oh my God, something nice is gonna happen, and then it's just like a drunk moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the main thrust of this episode is that Sam did not buy Rebecca a gift, even though nobody likes Rebecca, but Woody and Carla still got her a gift, and Sam decides that he is going to go buy her a gift because he wants to bang her. Like, that's what it comes down to. So there's a definite creep factor. Probably hasn't aged very well. He goes out at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Brian, no store is open up that late. It's absurd to me that there are certain stores that are still open at 10:30, 11 o'clock. And another Christmas trope, the idea of no gift until the last minute. We've seen that a million times. Boss making people work on Christmas. Sam coming in just as stores are closing. And I was just wanting to scream at the TV that no store is open this late on Christmas Eve. Most malls close at like 6 or 7 p.m. if even that late, especially in the 1980s. But yeah, it's a kind of a weird plot for the episode, weird timing.
If anything, he would have to gone to 7-Eleven or Circle K in 1987 to get a present at 11:30 at night. And 7-Eleven in 1987 did not even have the gadgets and gizmos that it does now in that first aisle. And I know what you know what I'm talking about, people, because they never had that back then. They added it in the late 90s. So yeah, no late Christmas presents in 1987, except the one that he got from his angel that appeared out of nowhere that kind of looks like Diane.
Right? Okay.
I don't know.
Please tell me that was intended to look and sound like Diane. I mean, they never say anything. They don't even make a joke about it.
You know what I mean? Like,
but come on, like she very much looks and sounds like Diane. Like very clearly is not as like book smart as she is, but like the idea of her being a guardian angel, like that first shot of her, like, come on.
see, it would work if she was an actual guardian angel. You know what I mean? That would have worked because it would reflect on Sam's, longing that, with the failure of the relationship with Diane, right? That's kind of what I thought they were going for until they revealed she's an actual pilot or stewardess, and she's just kind of like, just a normal person. I was like, oh, why even set up the angel part? But whatever. It's Christmas. I get it. So the guardian angel thing, and she comes in and saves the day, and gives Sam one of the presents that she had in her bag in order to give to Rebecca. And of course, it's a mix-up because it's a sitcom, and she ends up giving $500 earrings to Sam to give to Rebecca, and they don't even bother to open the box, which I thought was hilarious. And once you notice that they're not looking in the boxes, you realize, oh, something's up. They're going to do a switch up here. And it
Yeah.
cost $500 for, God, I mean, a pair of earrings that he didn't even know he bought. So very Christmas.
Yeah. And he loses out on the opportunity for a lingerie show to go to a dinner that everybody's apparently going to. A very late dinner, which, like, it's 12 or 1 in the morning at this point. It's like, you're doing dinner this late? So it's a little bit strange. I do have to say, we're burying the lead because Kelsey Grammer, I know that people love to watch Frasier, and I get that. He is absolutely on a heater in this episode. Just, like, I can't even give a best line because literally everything that Kelsey Grammer says in this episode makes me laugh because he's very cynical about the holiday. He's just making jokes and references. And then when it seems like Santa might be real, like he gains hope for a second. And then he's all in on Christmas. I love the idea that Lilith has more spirit than Frasier. I think that's really funny. I love the way that Lilith's character evolved on Cheers. And it really sucks to me that we didn't get like more of her on Frasier in some ways, but I mean she's very good on this show. And yeah, Kelsey Grammer is my best performance. Just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, man, Lilith is quite the arc. That's what I'll say, because she was so restrictive and restrained when she debuted, and then like her final episode, she's like this totally different, much more free of a person. Like it's quite the arc. And I'm glad you picked up on that too, because I noticed that when I watched that when I was younger, and I was like, she is so different than when she debuted. And Frasier is pretty much close to what he was when he debuted too. So he almost didn't change, and that's kind of the point, I guess, because he almost like Frasier's like, I don't know, whatever dialogue they give Frasier, he just delivers. Like you can give that man a cookbook to read, and he makes it work. You know
I mean, you've seen the movie where he was in with Edge, and some of the clips from that, right? Money Plane.
I kind of blocked that out of my head because Kelsey Grammer.
Oh, you just need to watch. You don't need to watch the movie. See if you can go to YouTube and just find clips of Kelsey Grammer in Money Plane, because he is eating a full meal in that. So best performance is Kelsey Grammer. Anything else before we go to the rest of the awards?
Well, I think he was just, I don't know why he was so grouchy and like anti-Christmas. I wish they kind of backed up. Did they reveal that in the previous Christmas episodes or no?
No, I mean, he's kind of a grump when it comes to like religion and stuff in general.
Yeah,
so I think that might be it. But
usually Frasier's like happy, and that was kind of off for me. You know what I mean? Like I'm usually seeing him like, unless it's the divorce episodes, which come later on when he's just really like miserable. But Lilith and Frasier always pop me. They're one of my favorite couples on the show. Like it's probably my favorite couple on the show, more so than like Sam and Diane and Sam and Rebecca, only because of that dynamic they have and the way that, like, from what I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but like the writers on the show, I don't know if they had like bets with one another, or like they would write down the most ridiculous line and see if Frasier can deliver it the best, and they would have a competition who can, that's what I've heard. I don't know if it's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably true. I mean, just especially,
oh man, some of the dialogue he has is just ridiculous, like total ridiculous, and he makes it work.
Yeah, I mean, there is an episode where it's where it's Sam, Diane, Lilith, and Frasier. I mean, it's basically a four-hander, and it's probably one of the best episodes of the series because just everybody involved is just right at the top of their game, and that is a personal favorite. I think that's from either season 4. I'm pretty sure it's season 5.
Yeah, because Diane and Fraser Free don't, little history lesson on Cheers, folks. They were a couple that broke up after season 3, I think.
Yeah,
And then
she stood him up. She stood him up at their wedding, and then
yeah, and then Lilith came in later on, and then she helped, get him with Lilith, and then that's how they kind of all came together as a group. So.
Yeah, so that's really really good stuff. Break the theme song. This to me is one of the best theme songs ever. Period. End of story. Pantheon. This might be the best theme song we talk about the entire month.
Probably, like I mentioned minutes earlier, that like I think the theme is more recognized for the piano than the lyrics, which is fine because like everyone, the quote is everyone knows your name. You want to go where everyone knows your name, but to me, it's that piano and the trumpet. You know what I mean? Like that is so iconic to me more so than the line.
I think if you just do the opening bum 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 bum, like you just know it's Cheers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's just more iconic with those little notes. So it's definitely Pantheon level. Like I love this song to death, even on road trips, because me and my two buddies, they go on Vegas road trips like every 6 months or so we go on trips, and we always bump this song and like the I Love Lucy, like just old school themes that would just make us feel young again. You know what I mean? And this is definitely one of those themes that get us popping. The full 2-minute and 30-minute version of the song is great, so I would recommend listening to the whole thing because they always cut it down. So.
And I also want to point out that I have actually been to Cheers in Boston.
My God. Is there really a fish restaurant on top?
No, it looks a little different, but you could definitely see where the inspiration was because it used to be called the Bullfinch Club, and then they changed it to Cheers because it became a tourist attraction. But yes, I have been to the real Cheers.
People don't realize is that the bar is like below level. You have to go take a stairs downward. It's one of those unique kind of buildings that didn't really make sense as a kid when you look at it, but now you look at architecture like, holy shit.
And the Cheers that is on the show is also much bigger because Boston is small. Like I think that's the other thing that people forget is like Boston is a really like squished in tiny city at times. And I think when you go into the actual Cheers, I think you'll see that. So in terms of the Christmas scale, I'm going to give this a 7. I think this is a good episode. I don't think this comes anywhere close to being like one of the 10 best or even 25 best episodes of Cheers. Because there were a lot of episodes. There's over 200. And this is probably like a mid-range episode of Cheers, which is still probably better than like 75% of your average sitcom.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'll go with an 8 actually because they did more with the taxi episode. Like they actually did the talking about the manger and like the farm Christmas we talked about, and like Angel getting his wings kind of trope, and then there's a lot of Christmas stuff going on. So I'm gonna go with an 8 on that. Best line is gonna be tough because you said everything Fraser says, right? Yes. I found the one line that really stood out for me, and I'm gonna try my best to quote it. But here we go. Doesn't that just epitomize the spirit of Christmas in the 80s? A gaggle of pie-eyed Santa Clauses all trying to find a designated driver to take the sleigh ride home.
That's pretty good. I mean, this is Kelsey Grammer eating a full meal on these episodes.
You know how like that is such a hard line to deliver, folks. You have no idea because of like the G's. Like there's a lot of ways they can write dialogue, but sometimes if it's too clunky, it's got to cut it down. In this case, they added more to the sentence. So there you go, man. Kelsey Grammer's like a unique character, man. A unique cat, for sure.
My main takeaway is don't leave a hit sitcom in the mid-1980s to do movies. I mean, again, now you could just do this and you can kind of go back and forth between movies and TVs. But man, like, and I like ultimately, I think the show needed to evolve and get away from the Sam and Diane dynamic just to survive. But man, it's tough. It had to be tough to be Shelley Long to leave the show, and like the show somehow gets bigger and more popular. Like again, I'm not sure if it's as good, but it feels like the show actually became bigger after she left.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's face it, no one really remembers True Beverly Hills, okay? The only reason I remember that because I watched the fucking, I think it was the E! True Hollywood Story where they told her, like, they said what she did right after. It was that. And I kept thinking, like, yeah, man, that sucks because, like, True Beverly Hills no one remembers, but if she just had a better agent, maybe? I don't know. It's hard back in the 80s to cross over, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
George Clooney did it in the mid-90s, but he did it after one season, you know what I mean? So it's
I
tough.
mean, even George Clooney struggled, though. I mean, yes, he was in From Dusk Till Dawn, but Batman and Robin was a huge bomb. And I think one of the reasons that he actually ended up on ER for as long as he did is because Batman and Robin was such a bomb. So, I mean, I think it was a real struggle for a while. I mean, again, now it's like, it's not a huge deal. Like, you'll be in a situation where every actor is seemingly doing both a movie and a TV show at the same time. So it's not even a big deal. But like back in the day, like you were either on a TV show or you were in a movie, and you didn't do both. Like Tom Hanks was in Bosom Buddies, and then he was in movies. Shelley Long was in Tears, and then she was doing movies. And David Caruso did one season of NYPD Blue, and then he tried to do movies and completely failed, and then was back on TV.
You're not going to believe who I just Googled as you said that.
Who?
David Caruso. Because I couldn't think of his name, but you're right. You mentioned it. That's the other one, too. That's the big one from the 90s. He had one season and left. But it's tough, man, because it's just, I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't translate to the big screen, and you got this ego behind you, and you make a bad movie, and you're fucked. So I get it. But nowadays, I think because the quality of shows have gone up, you know, the acting has become more, like, there's more expectations behind the acting, as opposed to just casting someone and just kind of, like, having a...
Everywhere you look, there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, there's a face of somebody who needs you. Everywhere you look, when you're lost out there and you're all alone, life is waiting to carry you home. Everywhere you look.
So yeah, that's my takeaway. Last but certainly not least, let's talk about Full House season 2, episode 9. Our very first Christmas show aired date December the 9th, 1988, just about a year after the Cheers holiday special. So I have to say that I think that there's probably no show that I've seen more. I would say The Simpsons is probably number 1. I would say Full House is very much number 2. Because when I was a kid, Full House was basically in syndication, and I think it was on like Channel 9 WGN affiliate in Chicago, like for an hour at dinner time. So I would see Full House like every single day. So I have seen like all of these episodes, except for this one, like because it's a Christmas episode, it really wasn't in the regular rotation. So I really haven't seen this episode nearly as much as a lot of the other ones. So I was very curious to see how this would play out, because, I mean, look, Full House is very much a family sitcom. And, of course, like, everybody makes fun of it because of just how wholesome it is. I laughed probably more than I was expecting, even though there were some problematic elements. And I definitely don't think I would ever sit down and watch Full House front to back like I would like Cheers or Taxi, but I didn't hate my experience watching it.
Yeah, for me, this is one of those most memorable Christmas episodes, and I've talked about this with a lot of people, because a lot of my generation did watch Full House like you did, like probably on syndication and then watching the new episodes on TGIF later on in the week kind of deal. Like that's the way they set it up. But this feels like a John Hughes movie to me. And I really picked up on that, especially watching this time around, because I feel like there's these moments where it kind of like it feels like a movie. Like if they stretched this out to like a full 90-minute movie and had a really good director behind it, it would have been like a John Hughes movie. And I felt like, man, this was almost like a missed opportunity in terms of like the script, because like this is such a good concept for like a Christmas movie, and God knows how many Christmas movies are made every year and they're always the same shit. You know what I mean? But this is like something different. Like this is the first time I ever heard of something like, oh my God, you got stuck at an airport on Christmas and you had to like sleep there. Like I'd never heard of that concept before until I watched this when I was a kid, and I was like, you can get stuck at an airport, and all the shit that was going down. And then of course I watched The Terminal years later, and I was like, oh, that's like that episode of Full House. So it kind of all comes together in terms of that. But man, I feel like the writing in this episode is not like 100% great, but the fact like the story structure fits so well into a 3-act movie structure. Like the beginning, obviously, the first act is going to be obviously, you know, with the plane, and then like the middle act is them, you know, going through the stuff, and then of course the last act is going to be them having that Christmas resolution, right? And I kind of pictured like planes, trains, and automobiles in my head. And I'm not sure if that was an influence as well, because I think that was 2 years before this, planes, trains, and automobiles, and we just reviewed that a couple years ago. So, man, like this whole episode feels like it was made for a movie, but it's kind of like, well, they had to put in a 25-minute story arc. But I mean, you can easily expand this because there's so many characters going on and there's so many things going on, like Uncle Jesse trying to finally get with Aunt Becky, and then their moment under the mistletoe, and then the fact that you got Uncle Jesse's parents there, I think adds to it because we hardly see his parents.
Even though I don't know why Uncle Jesse's parents are there.
Well, I mean, because Danny Tanner's their son-in-law, and their daughter just died years before, so
Right. Yeah,
that's kind of how I. Because if you think about it too, Full House has this really tragic like origin that no one really talks about.
And Fuller House somehow makes it more tragic because then DJ's husband dies too.
Oh, I didn't know that, but god damn, that sucks. God damn.
Right? Yeah,
Shit.
There's some real tragic shit going on in the Full House universe. I'll tell you what.
But I think that's part of the charm because it's all about, the idea of, working through that. Because, I mean, God knows how many tragedies that we've had in our personal lives, you know what I mean? So that's kind of like a real thing. So I do appreciate that. I think that's why people like kind of connect with Full House a little more, not because it was constantly syndicated, but there are some like things that people are like, attach themselves to. So, and I do love the fact that like, I don't know, it was weird that they kind of dominated the whole airport. Did you notice that? Like everyone was talking. I mean, the only people were talking that were just like them. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like, I wish they had.
I mean, you get the impression that there were other like we don't even. Did they even say what airport they were in?
No, they just said they had to stop. They didn't even mention a state. they didn't mention.
They could have been in some podunk airport, and maybe it was only some of the people in this one baggage area because it's a small airport. I mean, that's in my head canon. That's the only way that I could justify it. If you have the 90-minute
movie, you could have easily explained all that, but that's kind of what it is. And then the way that it's structured, like it is very tropey. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing with like Santa's not gonna find us, and then oh my god, that old crazy man was actually Santa the whole time.
Or is he a stalker? Because there is an argument to be made that he was just an old stalker because he doesn't actually bring presents. All he does is he allows the presents to be found. So my theory is that Santa Claus doesn't in fact bring presents. He just should be going to airports and magically making baggage reappear.
I mean, we need someone in the modern day to do that.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. You could literally take this episode. You could take the script from this episode. Instead of a video camera, you give Danny Tanner an iPhone and he's Instagramming live instead of shooting video for the TV show. Like, you would almost not need to change anything because nothing about air travel has changed except it's gotten worse.
True that. But speaking of, if you happen to be coming to LA, do not take LAX. I used to think that traveling by air was like the worst thing. Then I realized it's just I hate LAX. So if you ever come to LA,
LAX is the goddamn worst airport.
Burbank is the best. Burbank is awesome, but it's also expensive, but it's worth it.
So let's talk about some. We got Danny taking a selfie video in 1988. I do think that Uncle Jesse and Becky telling Danny that he is filming this trip because it is a tax deduction. That is the best line and a very Danny Tanner thing to do. I really love that. Can we talk about the sweaters? We've got Joey, Jesse, DJ, Stephanie. Some pretty quality 80s sweaters going on. Ugly Christmas sweaters.
I mean, that's kind of popular nowadays, ironically, right? That's what is this?
Right. I don't think they were wearing it ironically, though. Not like now they would, but back then they weren't.
Man. Culture change, man. It's amazing because nowadays you see like Darth Vader, Rick and Morty, like all kinds of crazy shit on Christmas sweaters nowadays, man. So again, it's a sign of the times, man. So it's so weird that people in this time thought it was like normal, and were they just laughing inside? I don't know, but it's so weird when you see these kind of things in like a dated episode like this.
So they're going to a family reunion. They never get into a lot of the specifics, which is whatever. But the funniest part of this episode to me, and it's only funny if you know, like Candace Cameron's like what she's doing right now and whatnot. But DJ goes Christmas gift hunting. She tells Michelle, which why would you tell Michelle? Like Michelle is a baby. Michelle doesn't have a filter, so why would you tell her? It just It makes no sense. DJ was never written to be a very intelligent character at times, but you do know Candace Cameron Bure's background now, right?
No. Did they make fun of that on South Park back in the day?
Well, let's talk about Candace Cameron. So you know Kirk Cameron, right?
Yes.
Do you know what Kirk Cameron is doing now?
Oh yeah, with the Jesus peoples and yeah.
So yeah, he is a part of the lunatic Christian fringe. Candace Cameron is not on Kirk Cameron's level. She is a step below, but she is also very much a part of that. But not only is she a part of that, but she is also in the Hallmark Great American Family universe. She used to be with Hallmark. She has jumped elsewhere. So she's one of these people that is doing these movies that air on Hallmark and I forget what the channel's called now, but yeah, she is a huge part of that. Great American Family, yes, that is the name of the service. But so yeah, Candace Cameron does all these crappy Christmas movies that take place in Vancouver and have the exact same plot, where the woman is coming from a big city to a small town and falls in love with some rando from a soap opera or whatever. So yeah, that's what she's doing now. And again, lunatic Christian friends.
So what you're telling me is that her best Christmas work is probably this episode.
It is very, very possible.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because like I mentioned earlier, there's always at least 20 Christmas movies released every year to those channels, and they just
it's more
have
than
no
20,
budget and just have the worst writing and just go with it, man. And it's ridiculous.
I mean, Lindsay Lohan is going to be in a Netflix movie that is basically in the same vein. Probably has a slightly higher budget, but yeah, Lindsay Lohan is going to be in one of those as well.
God. Well, at least we had that one movie last year that wasn't so tropey, the one about that kid getting a Nintendo on Christmas. So,
I mean, Joey Pantoliano is in one of these. Kelsey Grammer's in one of them this year.
I mean, I guess if they pay well, but I don't imagine those pay well. But I mean,
here's the thing: if they say we're going to pay you $100,000 for 3 days of work, you're going to take it.
Hopefully, it's 3 days of work. God damn, if it's that 3 days of work and a full movie.
I can't imagine a scenario where they're shooting more than 10 days on these movies.
I mean, me too. It's just, god damn, that's so low class to do a 3 day shoot for a full role.
I mean, maybe
whatever, man.
Here's the one thing I'm gonna say. Getting back to this episode, I just want to say I think Jesse's father is a total creep in this episode.
I mean, he did make out with his wife for 5 days straight, according to the records.
I mean, that's fine, but the way that he is telling her to, this is how rape culture happens.
It's just unfortunate his mom was encouraging.
I mean, that might actually somehow be worse, but I'm gonna blame the father because he's the one that's kind of the one that started it, because he's trying to egg Jesse on to go after and pursue Becky, even though Becky is just trying to get home to Nebraska to be with her cow, which, I mean, I rolled my eyes very hard.
I completely forgot that Rebecca was this country gal kind of thing. They don't really.
I feel like it gets lost pretty quickly because because Becky and Jesse. I mean, they basically start a sexual relationship quite quickly. The show doesn't make that clear, but boy, are they horny for each other on Full House.
Yeah,
and it goes into Fuller House too.
Yeah, and they kind of made some, I don't know if this was intentional, but they did leave some Easter eggs talking about, oh, Jesse, how come you don't have any kids yet? And blah, blah, blah. And then they talk about oh, you'll have a bunch or something like that. And he ends up having twins. So, they really set that up where he has no kids to having 2 kids all of a sudden that are just growing 3 seasons later. So they really set that up, man. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but they really kind of put that in your head. They're oh man, these 2 are going to have a family problem.
Yeah, I will say. So yeah, the presents get lost. They eventually find them. And I just want to say, Stephanie makes it very clear right from the beginning. She doesn't want to go on this trip. And you know what, Stephanie? I will tell you, you're absolutely right. No human being should travel on Christmas Eve. Good for her. I agree with Stephanie.
Yeah,
I'm on Team Stephanie in this episode.
The other thing is how come they didn't travel on the 23rd?
How about you just drive to Colorado instead?
That's what I thought too, because San Francisco, Colorado is not as long as people think. I think it's like 500 miles. Oh, I don't know.
I
Don't
mean,
quote me on that.
it could be kind of
Because
a
like,
pain in the ass if you're trying
because
to
like
travel with a baby.
every time we go to Vegas, right? It tells you like if you keep going to 15, you'll end up in Salt Lake City, which is 500 miles, and that's Utah. So Nevada or like Vegas to Utah, Salt Lake City is 500 miles. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's reasonable. You know what I mean? So, but then again, they would have to take like 3 cars, each one with a different guy in it.
Yeah, I would say that yeah, it's a fascinating episode. We also got Michelle ripping a toupee off an asshole, which there's always that guy on a plane. I feel like you could go on any flight, even today, and you would find that guy.
Well, unfortunately, I was on the opposite end of that because when I was like 4 years old on a plane or 3, I pulled some lady's like hair, not knowing, you know what I mean? Because it was hanging down. So I was like, oh shit, does this happen more often than I think? Like on planes and kids are just pulling on people's like wigs and shit. Because I totally did that because her hair was really long and it was braided. And at the time I was just like, oh, what is this? Because it was hanging in front of us and I pulled it and she was like, oh, what's going on? And then my mom was like so embarrassed. I remember, I clearly remember this. So I was like, damn, dude, that must really happen with kids because I did the same shit, but it wasn't a toupee. But but I think that's a little too far. But you know, at least it wasn't like a toupee that I grabbed off some random dude.
All right, so let's rank the theme song. I'm gonna say this is a bop. I don't think this is Pantheon level. I think this falls just a little bit short. Also, I never have seen the full theme song because again, I've always only watched this in syndication. So it was a shock to see like a minute long sequence at the beginning before the episode even began.
That's another thing I've learned over the years is that whenever a show goes into syndication, they cut that intro down as much as possible.
Right. So yeah, to have like this minute and a half theme,
yeah.
I was kind of blown away by it.
Yeah, when I'm watching the Married with Children episodes on Peacock, it's like the same thing. I'm like, dude, this intro's way too long. Like, what is going on here? And then you remember, like, again, episodes back then were 25 minutes. Now they're 22, and now it's even less, I think, because they want more commercial time anyway. So that's how advertising has just evolved over time. So for me, it's Pantheon level, and because everyone I know that watches the show, we all know the same lyric. Everywhere you look, there's a heart. And then we don't know the rest of the lyrics and kind of just make it up from there. But that's like the one lyric that all the people that I know who watch Full House, it's like that's the iconic line. And them on the hill, and then Jesse playing the guitar. Yeah, it's so iconic. So for me, it's on that Pantheon level, and one of the more I think are iconic ones because so many people go to the house and go to that hill. You know what I mean? Based off that intro of what they see. So that's kind of like a pop culture, you know, not a phenomenon, but still a pop culture thing today that people still go to that house and look for that same hill.
So yeah, best line, Uncle Jesse and Becky telling Danny that the filming is only for a tax deduction. Any favorite lines for you?
She went to go call her cow.
Yeah. Best performance is John Stamos. He gives this big speech about being in the Christmas spirit, and this was a huge showcase for John Stamos. I would say, like playing the comedic side with the Becky stuff, and the speech that he gives about like rescuing the holiday and whatnot. Like big moment for John Stamos. Definitely the best actor on the show, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I think I was expecting Danny Tanner to give that speech because you would figure he would be the one, but
well, Danny was broken.
he was just kind of like distraught with the presents being gone and just blaming himself. So, but it was cool because you kind of like you see Uncle Jesse in this role, and then later on, I think he's more underappreciated because like if you remember the episode where he plays his own cousin, that's one of the best performances he's ever given the show to me because that's like such comedic like. Well, timing and then the ability to come up with a different accent and then become the opposite spectrum of what you are as a character. Like he did that well. So he's one of the more underrated ones. I would say Uncle Joey is kind of like the most overrated one. No offense, but
the Dave Coulier stuff doesn't
because his comedy doesn't age well. To be honest, like it's all impressions, but once you get past
it's Jay Leno Carrot Top level, and I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, so it's kind of unfortunate, but. I mean, he did, I did like the part where, like, Danny, that's not me, and he shakes the bag, and you hear the jingle bells. nice little touch because now it's like a sound cue as opposed to opening up the bag and showing the thing. So that was a nice little sound cue because once the audience hears that, they realize, oh no, he's not Santa, so that's got to be the real Santa. And then that's the big ending. And then whether you believe he's like a crazy old man or not or whatever, but he did have animation on his laptop in 1988.
Yeah, for sure. Christmas scale, I would give this a 7. I think this is very Christmassy. This is definitely the weakest of the written shows, though.
I'm gonna go 8.5 for the Christmas scale because there was just like the big rah-rah speech about
You really love this episode, don't you?
I told you, man, like this is like a John Hughes movie, dude. Like I can picture Macaulay Culkin in this and like John Candy as like the Danny Tanner role and like, you know what I mean? Like Dan Aykroyd and like the Uncle Joey role and you make them a little older, you know what I mean? Like I can picture that and it really like works in that level. And I kind of wish they kind of remade this in its own movie, but I guess the closest thing we got is The Terminal. But I do love that idea of like one set and you got everybody on this one set and it's just kind of like claustrophobic a little bit, but it's Christmas and everyone's getting at each other. But then at the end of it all, you kind of like grow into this impromptu family on Christmas Eve kind of thing. Like that works for me.
The main takeaway is don't travel on Christmas. Stephanie was right.
The main takeaway was travel on December 23rd for crying out loud and not Christmas Eve.
Don't travel for Christmas, man. Just don't do it. Like, it's a terrible idea for so many reasons.
Yeah. And thank God Stephanie made that map. So everything we made up okay.
Yeah, so Santa, quote unquote, could stalk them.
Yeah, that was in fact Santa, which was weird because he was an asshole. It's like, well, they just made that up at the end, I think, but I don't know. It was a good turn, though.
All right. So we have commenced our conversation about Christmas with talking about Cheers, Taxi, and Full House. Next week, we are going to continue by talking about episodes of these shows: The Simpsons, Futurama, and South Park. Brian, I'm very excited to talk about the Futurama episode, especially because it's one that I don't think gets discussed a lot, but boy, is it dark. Woodland Critter Christmas is pretty dark, but the Futurama one is probably even darker, if you can believe it.
I mean, it's a murdering Santa, so, I mean, how dark can you get? And especially if it's a robot, that means the original Santa didn't live. So, there you go.
But yeah, next week is going to be an animation kind of thing, and then 2 weeks, we're going to talk about some modern sitcoms. We're going to talk about The Office, a show that doesn't get talked about at all, really, right? The Office.
I mean, it's not like it's outlived its meme game or GIF game 15 years after the show ended, right?
Yeah, Ted Lasso. I know you have to be excited to talk about Ted Lasso, though.
Yeah, that show, like, borderline changed me and some of my friends' lives. So there we go, man. Much praise to Ted Lasso. And the Christmas episode is not even the best episode, in my opinion, but...
no, I mean, it's a good one, but yeah, well, I'm sure we will have an extended conversation on Ted Lasso. All right, so yeah, we will be back next week. For Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you again. Have a great week.
So, did we miss out on Kelsey Grammer being the ultimate perfect Grinch for like the 80s and 90s?